Well, hello, everybody. It's John Pollock and Wai Ting. And what a show we have for you. It is the WrestleMania 37 Roundtable. And I believe that the temperature from hell today is freezing because joining us, Dan the Mouth Lovranski, and yes, Jason Agnew from Sunday night's main event here for the collaboration, the WrestleMania 37 Roundtable edition. Hello, guys.
I would rather take the Thin Lizzy approach and say the boys are back in town rather than say hell's freezing over. The boys are back in town. That's how I see it.
Well, there we go. Here we are after a lengthy amount of time. Jay, it is good to chat with you.
Oh, hi. How's it going?
It's going swell. It's going swell.
Cool. Great.
Mr. Ting, are you with us?
I am here, and yeah, this is definitely probably a surprise, occasion for a lot of people. But I think, just to peek behind the curtain a little bit, this is not the first time, we are interacting on air.
It's
or at
the
least
second.
it's the second time, yeah. Well, I mean, it is the first time we were interacting on air after a long while, but we did have a private conversation, all of us. I guess without mouth, but anyway. Just to let everybody know, there's a lot of probably weirdness, like everybody was thinking about, but between all of us, but we are putting it all aside for the sake of WrestleMania, and we'll see how this goes.
If ever there was a reason to all come together, it was Shane McMahon and Braun Strowman coming up this weekend. How can we possibly let this go and not all of us get our shared views and opinions on such a historic showdown this week, where we will find out if a man is actually stupid or not?
Well, I think that it's funny that we're doing this, and I think WWE and AEW really jumped on board this before we did, considering the announcement of Jericho and Stone Cold. And everyone's saying the forbidden door with that. And I'm like, they got to it first. But, well, they got to the announcement first, but we'll at least have this on the air or up online before people are allowed to see what's going on with the Austin podcast on Sunday night, which probably for people like us is the most highly anticipated thing that is going on this weekend for WrestleMania.
Well, I was going to ask you guys, like, how big of an event just that podcast is going to be this weekend in the mix of everything. Like, I think it's going to be certainly a must-see interview for people just to see how it's handled, right down to, does AEW provide them footage? How much of AEW is covered in that interview? That, for the busiest weekend of the year, I think they've been very smart to carve out a portion that people are going to be seeking out this interview on Sunday.
I think a lot of people are more hyped for this than WrestleMania because a lot of the WrestleMania card has had a pretty poor build. There's not a lot of captivating matches, but as Jay mentioned, this is incredibly captivating to the wrestling fan to have these two guys from rival companies sit down and talk and just, with Stone Cold, he's not going to beat around the bush. So I'm sure they're going to cover AEW and other Jericho stuff when he was in there. So it's definitely going to be one of the highlights of the week. There's no doubt about it. I'm very much looking forward to it.
But what it's going to come down to is, if this going on the WWE network, I mean, who's the person that is editing this? I mean, who has creative control over it? For instance, on this particular podcast, I'm going to edit out everything John and Wai say.
Well, we're not giving any footage either, so it's going to be
there. You go, right? No, but I mean, think about that, right? This is something that is airing on the WWE network via Peacock. Some people have compared it to CM Punk being on Fox. So it's just curious what will make the final cut. And on top of that, so there's a certain portion that is going to be on the WWE network, but is there going to be an extended version that is available on Austin's audio podcast as well? Or is what's out there on WWE network the only portion that is available to anyone?
Or maybe some of it goes on Jericho's podcast, right? Maybe some of it ends up on his podcast. Maybe they do something where they both kind of share it.
Yeah, I mean, like Austin's really I think pretty much dialed back, and I don't even know how much new stuff he's even putting on that podcast feed any longer. I think what we see on Sunday is going to be it. The way it's been promoted, you have to cover AEW, but especially of these latest Austin ones, it's much more an entire career retrospective, which is what I think we're going to get out of this. And I guess that will be the ultimate question of how much you go into AEW. I mean, to me, you can go as deep as you want, but I'm not expecting that. I don't think it's
just to be devil's advocate, do you think they ignore AEW altogether?
They
could do that too, though. They could.
No, because that's what this whole thing is promoted around. It's like, I'm not expecting them to get into, rating stuff and, Jericho being very discontent about anything related to WWE, but you have to spend at least enough that those people tuning in, you are addressing AEW, because that to me is the intriguing part of this.
I think you get a section where you have, Jericho talking about his departure from the WWE, maybe what that moment in particular was like with Vince. But I don't really anticipate them spending detailed time on both New Japan and All Elite. Maybe a section condensing all of that stuff into one portion. But beyond that, I am interested in the show, but it'll probably be more of a Monday morning, after the dust is settled from the weekend type of thing for me.
Well, I mean, we're considering doing a watch along. That's how fascinating we think that it is, even though it's coming on the tail end of WrestleMania. The nice thing about it, though, is with dividing WrestleMania on 2 nights, you are less tired by the end of that second night because you have had the sleep in between, as opposed to the 8 hours that all of us used to go through. So I think there's still going to be a little bit of fuel in the tank, especially for the hardcore fans, which is really who this is aimed at. And I have seen, like, the day after this was announced, I posted it up on our page about WWE then highlighted Jericho's career on the WWE Network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really smart move for them to do this. It's like, for Peacock, for this being such a big launch period, I thought this was like a really smart move on their part. And I think people get really intrigued by the idea of WWE even acknowledging AEW, but to me, like, they're doing it to their benefit on their terms, on their platform. So I thought this was a great idea. That sounds like it was largely spurred on by Austin and Jericho, but I think very smart of WWE to approve it and go this direction. I think Austin, you can only go through so many roster members that are going to have a level of buzz to them, and I'd say very few are going to have this level of intrigue. This kind of opens it up to go to non-WWE performers that are going to be of interest. And there's only a handful of them that are out there that this Austin podcast can be an outlet for, that WWE benefits from.
So is it a one-time thing, or do we then see someone like, well, we don't want the repeat of the Jon Moxley, but maybe we do want repeat of Jon Moxley, because that was a horrendous podcast when it was Ambrose and Austin. But now he's much more comfortable, and maybe he can say more, and maybe it would be fun to watch them comment on what happened before. Or do we see someone like Kenny Omega pop up here, or is this a one and done?
I would think that they're only going to stick to people that were formerly on their roster. I don't see them doing one with Kenny Omega. I could see one.
He was there. He was there. He was a jobber.
Yeah, for what, a cup of coffee? Like, come on,
the deep dive into Deep South.
Yeah,
Kenny Omega.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if they would go to other AEW guys. Like, you're not going to see, Darby Allin, or you're not, I don't know. Does he do someone? Has he done Sting before?
I don't think so.
That would be, that would draw a huge amount of viewers as well. Even though Vince probably wouldn't care, because he doesn't care about Sting, as we've seen over and over again.
Well, I guess, guys, just looking ahead at the format for the 2 nights, splitting it up into 2 nights, they're listed as like 3-hour windows. Obviously, they could go a little longer than that, but I think that is going to make a giant difference in people's takeaways from the show, because, as you mentioned, Jay, getting away from the 7-hour format, I don't care what you've got on that card, you hit burnout 4 hours in. And I thought last year, that was one of the positives, I thought, of breaking them up. And you're at least going to have an environment, unlike last year. And 3.5-hour shows, I think that's much, much more significant to stomach than the marathon format.
So does it continue? Because I think that's the bigger question here. I mean, we've seen New Japan do this for 2 nights already, and they've done it 2 years back to back, and it seems like that's become a tradition. And the first year was done pretty much via necessity. This year, though, we've got fans in the stands again. Has WWE gone this direction, and are they sticking with it, do you think? I know we're still in a pandemic, but I mean, on behalf of all of us who have to watch everything, I think the 2-night event is the way to go.
I certainly think that they've learned from, the benefits of having these shorter shows. The entire year, we've seen them condense the length of these pay-per-views to, sometimes, most of the time, sub 3 hours, maybe sometimes even sub an hour, 2 hour, 2.5 hours. So I think they understand the benefits of it, and I think they understand that an 8 hour show or a 7 hour show that like they used to do for WrestleMania is not helping anybody. It's not helping the quality of their show. It's draining the audience that's actually paying to go there. This year, I found it really interesting to see that they were keeping this to, what seems to be a 3 to 4 hour window because they do have paying audiences. So in the future, it tells me that they're probably just as willing to do the same. 3 to 4 hours, maybe, like 5 at the max.
Yeah, I think it benefits everybody all around. I mean, it benefits the live crowd, I think. It benefits us sitting at home. And I won't get nearly as hammered if the show is divided up into 2 nights, because by the end of the 8 hours, I could barely stand half the time. So.
You get hammered both nights, though, Mouth, but that's no different than any other night.
No, but you can pace it a little bit better when you only have 3 hours rather than 7. Right. When you have 7 or 8, that's asking for trouble.
This is the market research I don't think they tap into enough with their fan base. I think the trouble you run into, though, for next year is the idea of running AT&T Stadium on consecutive nights. I just don't see. I mean, granted, we are in the pandemic and such, but these shows, like, there's still tickets available for at a scaled down format. And I think in a venue that size next year, it's just too ambitious to run back-to-back nights. Even with one night, I mean, who's to say who's going to be around next year? Because like this lineup we have this year, even if you were to combine it into one night, I don't see that putting 80,000 people into AT&T Stadium. Like, you're going to have to go outside, and all those key players are going to be a year older, and who's going to be around next year?
I mean, I kind of see next year as Lesnar and Reigns, and then when they go to LA the year afterwards, that's Rock and Reigns. And I think that's the master plan that they have for the next 2 years to try to draw WrestleMania audiences as large as they will have to be.
Well, that if they bring Rock back, then they will be able to fill the AT&T Stadium, I think.
No, I think that's 2 years away, though. I think that's LA as opposed to next year.
LA, Texas. Okay, right.
Undertaker can come back next year and just maybe die in the ring.
Yeah, he just goes out and lays down. That's it.
In terms of the first night, what do you guys see closing the show? I guess it's down to 2 options in the women's title match and Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre.
I think Bobby and Drew has had the most, attention and TV time, but something tells me it's going to be Bianca and Sasha. And part of the reason is because I don't rule out that Lashley will retain. I think for sure Bianca is going to win, so maybe they'd want to end that first night with a babyface win.
I think they're going to go with the women's match too as the main event, just to shake things up for the 2 nights, and then have the 3-way on the second night as the main event, instead of having 2 somewhat similar matches headlining each night. And I think people are very much into Bianca Belair and that, and I think they would get into seeing that match. And I'm not so sure that Lashley's going to win either way. I kind of think it's going back to McIntyre.
Possible.
I think it's going back to McIntyre as well, but I think you have the ability for a star-making moment here for Bianca Belair, and they finally figured out that Sasha Banks is and should be a heel after not promoting her on The Mandalorian, which has been ridiculous all year long. So if you're going to do that, and for the sake of, putting a focus on women's wrestling, you don't have Charlotte on the card this year. The Rhea Ripley-Asuka thing is very rushed and doesn't make all that much sense. So that is your strongest women's match. You're going to put on night 1, have it main event. It does check a lot of boxes. I honestly feel bad for Drew McIntyre. I mean, here's a guy who's pushed his way through. He finally got his big WrestleMania win last year to no fans. But I was doing a podcast yesterday, and I think K. Trevor Wilson brought up the fact that you have both Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre with a very similar story of having to go away from WWE in order to grind it out and come back and become champion. So both of these guys are telling the same story, but ultimately it would be nice to see Drew get his big win, but I don't think it'll be in the main event slot.
Yeah, I could see it. It could even be down lower, because I wouldn't be surprised if they put Shane and Braun as like the co-main event on that show.
Yeah, it'll be interesting what they put out first, because that's going to be such a rabid response that you're going to get, that I would say if you're not going on last, it's almost as advantageous to want to be in that opener spot. And I guess that's, wide open to however you want to start it. But
So did you say rabid or rabbit? Is it Bad Bunny that you're suggesting to come out there and rap his way to the ring? And
I would not be starting with Bad Bunny, but it might be, honestly, you bring up the fact, well, we were moving over to the second night. Like, honestly, Orton and The Fiend would be best served to just be first. And you get that over
best
with.
served to be not there at all.
Well, it's like, where do you even put this, where so much of an element of this is that you can't do all the hocus pocus in front of a live crowd. And there's got to be some cinematic portion to that match. You really risk just turning that crowd off. That I would put that on earlier rather than late on the second night.
I think that can go in the middle of the show. I think it'll be a way to potentially, act as something to break up, a typical string of maybe in-ring matches. I definitely expect some sort of cinematic element, and and this to me will be no different than like a musical performance in the middle of a WrestleMania.
It would be
It's
nice
a tough one. I wish they were doing a lights out match and they would just leave the lights out and we wouldn't have to watch it. Dexter Lumis comes in, turns off the lights, and that's it. We get 20 minutes of darkness, and we don't have to put up with it, because I so do not want to see that match. It's obviously there for Shane to do his big stunt off the cage. The story has been terrible.
What are we talking about now? Are we back on that match, or are we over?
I was talking about The Fiend.
We're talking about The Fiend,
sorry.
Mouth.
I'm preoccupied.
But I mean, I'm sure
drinking
Mouth,
already.
I'm sure Mouth's thoughts apply just the same for the Fiend match.
Yeah, it's exactly. I think you're right to put it somewhere near the beginning, because if it's at the end, that's what people remember, right? When he set him on fire at that one show, that was the big thing that everybody remembered at the end, and we all hated it. So I would think that, they might even start with it just to get it out of the way. You never know.
Okay, so hold on. We didn't see any live action from The Fiend and Randy Orton this week on Raw. We saw nothing at all. So I'm wondering, they haven't fully stated that this match is going to be in ring. John, you also brought up that there has to be a cinematic element. Last year, if you remember back, it was John Cena and The Fiend, and it was just an acid trip, essentially. I mean, I'm wondering if they just go that exact same direction this year. They haven't announced everything. They know expectations are low. It's barely a match at all. And they just perhaps put it after some, because I'm staring at the card here and I'm trying to figure out if there's another crescendo on the card midway through to be able to then put this afterwards so the fans can all go pee after, celebrating a nice moment, and they'll just roll this tape.
I mean, I think it'll be different from a Firefly Funhouse match, because I think if it was that, they would have promoted it as a Firefly Funhouse match. This is just straight up like Randy Orton versus The Fiend. I do think there will be some sort of cinematic element, but I think ultimately it'll probably end in ring with something. Yeah.
This one, to me, it's like, why is this even happening? I mean, we've seen this with him and Randy Orton countless times. I don't believe it was ever successful. I don't believe anybody's ever liked a Fiend Randy Orton match. Yet here we are again. It's like they're mining a dirt field and there's nothing there. I'm just so sick of this feud. They've pretty well done everything. What are they going to do? Like, burn the building? This match will have to be last because they're going to burn the building down or some horse shit. So I don't know. I'm just so tired of this feud. Like, it just needs to go away. I would love one of them to get hurt before the weekend and we can't have the match.
Well, that's a bold prediction.
That's where I'm coming from.
Mouth is rooting for COVID to win this match.
That's right. They already did its job on NXT. Let's get the Fiend now.
Looking at the rest of the card for night one, like, I can't say this is the night that to me really stands out. I think a lot of it is going to rest on, the two title matches we talked about with Lashley and Drew and Sasha and Bianca Belair. And the rest of this, I think Cesaro and Seth Rollins, like, that to me is your big bell to bell match that, given the lineup and you've got 7 matches, like, this should be a rare year where you're not looking at a match like that that's going to only get your 8 or 9 minutes. Like, they should have the time to go out there and have a fantastic match, which I think Seth Rollins desperately needs right now, because I hate this character.
I don't necessarily know if that match, for the way that they've built it, is all built around one spot, and it's 37 spins. And I think the match is just going to come about with Cesaro continually going for the spin, and he'll finally accomplish it. So I actually think the work rate of the match is going to be pushed aside due to the gimmick that's been pushed.
I think you could have both. I think you could tell the story of him hunting for the swing while the two of them engage in a good match. As far as work rate on the card, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair to really bring it, and I think Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre will be really good too. Of course, you have AJ Styles, and he can always do the heavy lifting for him and Almost in that match with the New Day, but. The excitement to me of that match is actually more so seeing what Almost does, how he is able. They've set up a lot of expectations for this guy. They've really given him every sort of shortcut that they have to promote him as a big deal. So how they're going to push him in that match will be fascinating to me. To see what sort of stunt Shane McMahon does is another point of fascination. We're gonna have to bear through the rest of the match though, but I'm curious to see what he jumps off of.
Well, I'm sure it's a cage match, is it not? So I'm sure it's going to be.
See, it's got to be bigger than that, don't you think, Mouth? We've seen him jump off of a Hell in a Cell.
Well, I don't know. It has to involve jumping, and usually it has to involve going through the announce table. So I'm just trying to figure out what options are there. Unless they were going to do the 3-tiered cage like in WCW, and he climbs all the way to the top of that. And
maybe it'll be Braun falling off the cage. That's the swerve.
I really want to throw. I think it's a matter of
maybe Braun falls off the cage and then Shane gives him a splash or a elbow or something. I could see it happening.
I think it's a matter of, is Shane jumping or is he being thrown? I think it's one of those two things is going to be happening in that match. And also, you brought up Almost. I think he's walking away a champion there as well. I think that they're going to do.
Yeah, I do too. I think they're winning the belts. They're going to have to book him. With him, it's really simple. You just give him a few monster spots in the match where he shows off the power and the dominance. And then, like you said, where AJ can do the rest of the match. Just have him in there once in a while for some big spots. AJ can jump off his shoulders and all that kind of stuff, right?
We can go over the tag team turmoil match, but why?
Let's not.
Unless
what
either of you
what a mess.
Do either of you expect Charlotte and Bayley on this card in any form or fashion? I guess this is one spot, though. I think that feels so uninspiring to just throw them into this mix. But this is a pretty nothing match without them.
It's your classic get everybody on the card match, right? Just throw everybody out there because we want them all on the card. I don't think we're going to see Bayley or Charlotte on this show. They're pretty well persona non grata.
The last time we saw Bayley, she stopped doing a vignette and walked away. And that was the last time. It's been very strange. She just seems to be been forgotten about. So I'm wondering if they're doing a gimmick swap there. They could put them in there. It makes for a more interesting match the following day with Nia and Shayna. But I've really seen a push for Lana and Naomi to be getting a WrestleMania moment and beating Nia and Shayna that following day. There's your crescendo before the Bray Wyatt match.
I still feel on this show that we're getting Nia Jax taking out Carmella for her treatment of Reginald, and Billie Kay is all at her lonesome, and out comes Peyton Royce.
And they put them back together?
Yes, we retcon this whole last 8 months.
Yep. It was a mistake to break them up, that's for sure. Everybody likes them better together. They're doing nothing apart from each other, so...
I'm quite disappointed because I think this whole thing could have been a great way to set up the Riot Squad. If after that Liv Morgan documentary that aired on the network, I felt like that was such a there was there was a bit of momentum online between behind Liv Morgan and wanting to see her kind of overcome a past year of really nothing type of booking. Leading up to this particular moment in WrestleMania, beating somebody like Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. But unfortunately, they're just, another forgotten team in that division with really no push to be found. So it's to me just a kickoff match.
There was a point where I thought that it would have been okay if they were going to integrate the NXT brand before they decided to do the NXT tag titles. And I thought this could have been the moment where you did have the NXT competitors come up whether it's Raquel and Dakota or whether it's Ember and Shotzi, either one for NXT to be represented and take the titles away from Nia and Shayna there. Could have been the ultimate revenge on the biggest stage, and it would have been great to introduce new characters, but clearly they have not made that decision, so instead, Naomi and Lana.
Yeah, just so we could see Lana go through the table again. That's the only reason that's there, I'm sure. Although Shane might get mad. Shane might get mad and say, "No, you can't go through the table. That's my spot."
Well, I mean, you have to delegate table spots on this particular show. So Lana might be out of luck for her big moment on night one. But night two, let's chat about that with Roman Reigns, Edge, and Daniel Bryan for the Universal Championship. I think this has been the best built up match of either night, and I think you can make interesting arguments for any three to go over in this match. I just can't see them ending off this weekend where they don't know when they're going to be back in front of fans without a big babyface victory. So that's why I see Daniel Bryan winning this, and then you can spin him off. I think it makes all the sense in the world that Edge does not take the fall, but doesn't leave with the title. So he gets screwed out of that shot, and you can spin that off. But this,
wait, you don't think Edge takes the fall here?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Bryan is not beating Edge for this?
I would have Bryan. I mean, you've already, to me, I'd be looking at this point with Roman Reigns that he loses here. He's already tapped out. And the story to me has been how Bryan has screwed up everything for him, and Edge loses here without getting pinned or submitted.
Wow. I thought that they're doing this. They've got three people in here to allow Roman to lose the title without getting pinned.
I just see everyone wants to see this Bryan Edge match. To me, that's the most interesting dynamic of the three, that sets up your singles match between these two. And I think just to maximize that, Edge should be the one that doesn't lose the fall.
Personally, I wish they'd really just left Daniel Bryan out of the whole thing, because I really like the story with Edge and Roman Reigns better. And the fact that you could give Edge the big WrestleMania victory after he's come back from the previous WrestleMania there, where he had to give up his career and all that stuff, and to have him win the title. I thought they might also go the route of keeping it on Reigns and then doing something with Edge and Bryan and spinning them off in a program of some kind.
I think there are a bunch of ways you could spin off this program, and maybe like one sort of finish would lead you directly better into the other one, but no matter what happens, they can build to the next match. Look, they had Roman pinned Daniel Bryan in like 30 seconds in the last pay-per-view, and he's all of a sudden is in the main event. So I think by the time they have to build to their next pay-per-view, whatever match they want to go to, we'll probably have forgotten exactly what specific finish they use for this. But I personally see Bryan winning this one.
I still can't believe that they just decided to push aside the comeback story of Edge
and
flip him heel.
Yeah.
But we might also be biased of people that have watched him for so many years, and along with that, he's Canadian. But his most compelling characters have always been heels, but in this particular place, I felt like he crossed over in his mouth, as you always say. There gets to be that point where you don't want to boo someone. We saw it with Ric Flair, and I kind of thought Edge had hit that point, but hey, maybe not.
To me, the main really amazing WrestleMania moment would have just been Roman versus Edge. Edge wins the title. Last image you see is him winning the title. He's crying. He's come back after 10 years. Like, it's such a great story. I thought inserting Bryan in it really kind of wrecked it.
Christian comes out. He says he's going to do the Stone Cold podcast as well. Massive invasion angle. I see it. Yeah.
I mean, it's hilarious because you look at how this got to this three-way, and it's like, this is not a case where it's like the audience just suddenly started turning on Edge. You had complete control of this. It's almost like they just felt like this this momentum shifting. You put Bryan into this because again, like, you don't even know what the reactions are going to be like for any of them, but you could very well see a case where all three of these guys are received very positively from this crowd. It's especially Roman Reigns. This is the first time an audience has got to interact with this heel version of Roman Reigns that ultimately is going to get cheered, I think, once you have fans back.
That's an interesting point. The idea of what it's going to be like for these shows with people actually in the stadiums. And because it hasn't happened for so long, and I know we always worry that, that the fans will crap on something or they'll hijack something. But honestly, because it's been so long since any fans been able to participate in a live setting like this, I think the crowd's going to eat up everything. I really do. I think they're going to be pretty excited.
I think so too.
Asuka and Rhea Ripley for the Raw Women's Championship that, we found out on Monday the two could not coexist in a non-title match where Rhea Ripley sold for the whole match and then turned on Asuka. I thought this was dreadful on Monday night, but here we are. The introduction of Rhea Ripley, who's going to have a live musical performance for her entrance.
Great. For the heel? Because she's the heel, right? Even though she had a great showing in the Royal Rumble, Rhea is the heel. To me, that right there is a complete mistake with this character. Imagine what this story could have been with her not winning the Rumble, but even placing second. That's fine. And then somehow you got the belt on Charlotte and Rhea got her win back this year and would have made everything make sense from last year when Triple H said, don't worry, we got something planned.
Well, who knows what went on with Charlotte?
Wait until it plays out. That's what we were told last year. Yeah, I thought there was like a whole lot you could have done with Rhea Ripley in these last few months, and it just seemed the least creative idea was holding her off until she walked out and pointed to the sign to get her title match, and then the two opponents teamed together on the Go Home Raw. And that's about the depth of this program going into Sunday. So I found this to be very disappointing for someone in Rhea Ripley that you've had basically a year to reintroduce her onto the main roster after she was on last year's WrestleMania card.
I really feel like Charlotte was supposed to play a role in this entire thing, whether or not she was supposed to replace Asuka or just be figured into a three-way. And to me, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we learned later that like Rhea was in a bit of a holding pattern, waiting for whatever was going on with Charlotte. Who knows what? So really unfortunate. I think at the very least we can expect a great match between these two. At least we can hope for that. Whether or not, like, the time is right for a title change for Rhea Ripley as a dominant heel, I'm not exactly sure, but at the same time, I think Asuka's held onto this belt long enough to achieve anything, and I would probably give it to Rhea Ripley for a fresh direction.
I don't think they're going that way, though, considering the past two televisions where you've seen a definite advantage for Ripley. I would be surprised if they let her 3 in a row knock down Asuka.
Then we've got the first and hopefully only Nigerian drum fight for the Intercontinental title. No limits, no rules, just beating someone
no sense.
So loudly it sounds like a drum. That is how this was built with Big E and Apollo Crews for the Intercontinental.
Are they going to have drums at ringside? Like, are they going to be fighting amongst drum kits or big Congo drums or something? Like, is there any actual representation of a drum here, or
there will definitely be drums ringside, I bet.
Because it's always, whenever I've seen bands get in fights and they fight amongst the drums, it's awesome. It's crazy.
I think they should give the audience drums and give us a big drum circle.
So like in Karate Kid? Like in Karate Kid, where they all have the little drums in the audience?
Yeah.
Oh, I like it. Cobra Kai's hot.
The thing with this whole thing is like, this is the classic one. It's like, why couldn't you do some vignettes? How he comes out on TV just one week. He's got an accent. He's from Nigeria. He's royalty. Like, come on. You could have easily had him disappear for a while and do some vignettes and bring him back properly. You can't, in this day and age, you can't change people on a dime like that and expect people to get behind them. This match is,
I've been a defender of the gimmick because of the way it was introduced. I mean, the
Really?
idea, I think, from the beginning was supposed to be, in my opinion, it was supposed to be Cruz came out and said, this is how I sound. I know this is not the way you've heard me before, but I'm going to speak this way in spite of, you guys. Like, I'm going to do it to spite you guys because I've been told throughout my entire life that I cannot sound like this. So I'm going to purposely sound like this just to mock you guys for thinking that, for thinking somebody like me can't be myself. And that's not a point that I think they've hit on anytime after that.
I was just about to say that never
It's not
came.
something that Big E has ever sold or even acknowledged in his promos. Like I just simply wanted Big E to say, "Can you stop using that stupid accent? I know that's not how you sound. You're doing it to annoy us purposely." Like he'd never sold it. So as a result, I think you're just kind of left with people, really criticizing just how cartoonish this whole thing has felt.
This just goes back to my theory, and I've said it on the show a couple times. Vince McMahon loves Coming to America. If you look back, I'm actually serious about this now. Coming to America was released in 1988, and all of a sudden, the one-man gang is turned into Akeem for Prince Akeem in Coming to America. Along with that, the band in Coming to America is called Sexual Chocolate. So this year, we get Coming to America, the sequel that comes out, and boom, we've got another Coming to America character on WWE television. This time, it's Apollo Crews.
Well, they still could have done something like that, but I just think the presentation should have been a lot better. Wai, your interpretation is very interesting, but you had to come up with that interpretation.
He said that in his first promo.
I don't remember that.
He
I don't remember
alluded
him
to it.
saying that. Yeah. Well,
Yeah. It was on a SmackDown.
I think it's overall just a program that has just greatly run its course, because this is like their 5th singles match at this point, where Big E has beaten this guy like a drum for the last 2 months. And there has been zero explanation as to why Crews has just repeatedly gotten all of these shots. And it seems that, well, here is our gimmick idea for the latest match. And this is one to me that just needed a lot more story attached to it. And instead it's just been just recycling the same match over and over again and not really given any answer as to why.
So Apollo wins. Apollo wins on this show. It's
no, that's the logical expectation after all of this. I expect Big E to retain and defend it at the next pay-per-view against Apollo.
And that's where Apollo wins.
Brutal.
Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn with Logan Paul as the special guest, that I'm hoping ends with Owens stunning Logan Paul and not if they want to leave WrestleMania with Logan Paul as the babyface, good luck.
I think that's what they're going to try for. Logan Paul punching out Sami Zayn to get ready for his fight.
Is Jake Paul going to show up too? Are we going to get a Ben Askren cameo in this?
Maybe.
As well?
I'd love to see Ben Askren cut a promo. He's fantastic at that.
This is another angle for me that it's just like, I mean, we've seen this done a million times. This is what they did when the two of them came into the promotion the first time. Like, it's just an angle and a story that's been done to death. And I as soon as they started going in this direction again, I'm like, I'm not interested. It's just, I've seen it way too many times. And to go back to it now, just because you almost feel like you got nothing else to do, I'm not a big fan. I'm just tired of it.
I do think like this match came together sort of in that way. I think Zayn's been awesome in this character. I really love the conspiracy theorist, and I think he's been fantastic. With Owens, he was fantastic in the Reigns program, and it just seemed like after that, he was very much like that. Felt like that was a one pay-per-view program that they extended through the Rumble. And after the fact, it was, well, where does Owens fit in? And this was the answer. Like, this felt like it could have been anyone inserted into this. You are leaning on the backstory of these two, but at the same time, like, I think this should be a great match. And I guess you get your whatever involvement with Logan Paul as your clip to circulate everywhere after the fact. But I think it's a big question of like, does Logan Paul really attract interest here? He's got an enormous following, but does that translate to people having the interest to watch this show for him?
It's interesting both with Logan Paul and with Bad Bunny. They're not really traditional celebrities to be used by WWE, but I do think it's a conscious effort on their part to be able to grab onto audiences that they do not have, a younger audience than what they normally go for. And if you look even comparatively to AEW, who used Shaq, and that wasn't, I mean, his performance was excellent, and I think we probably all enjoyed it, but it didn't really turn into the viewers that they wanted. And I think they're trying a different route here in WWE with these WrestleMania celebrities, and kudos to them for trying. Neither one does much for me, though.
Well, what is a traditional celebrity anymore? I think, all celebrities these days are more and more niche. And so, especially to reach a younger audience, they are going to have to go a bit more niche, and maybe that means a Logan Paul. For me, like what story appears on screen is definitely secondary to, I think, maybe just the idea that Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, two guys who have just wrestled everywhere together in front of the smallest crowds, now finally getting a singles match with one another at a WrestleMania. There's a personal story there that is not being told on TV that I think is bigger than anything that they could fabricate.
It's very true. Yeah, it's very true. It's
And then
hard
the
with
card.
the celebrity stuff is hard because it's such a hard pick to you know. I mean, look at it, the Hall of Fame. They're going to put in William Shatner and all that kind of stuff. Like I just feel they need to pick celebrities that are, you know, more well known to the general public. I mean, I know nothing about Logan Paul or
Yeah,
Bad
but
Bunny.
Mouth, that's the point. That's the point. They have the 50-year-old demographic. They're trying to aim younger, and that's the goal.
Okay, then how about this then? Oh, no, this might be old too. Why isn't Eddie Murphy or Arsenio Hall with Apollo Crews then?
No, that's completely an older demographic that plays off nostalgia.
But it's a new movie. Coming to America too. It's new.
What's next?
There's no chance. There's no chance they could get either of them. Even
Unless Eddie
Arsenio.
Murphy was going to loan his Bugatti for an angle. I mean, then they might be open to it. I think ultimately, like for modern day pro wrestling, when you're seeking these celebrities, like, yes, the number one thing is what is their reach, but number two is like, how on board are they for this? Like, if like a Logan Paul, like for Shaq, I agree with you, Jay. Like, he was great on that show. You didn't so much as get a tweet out of this guy promoting any of this stuff ahead of time. At least with Logan Paul, he's talking about this. Bad Bunny's training at the Performance Center. So it's like that to me is the combination of their reach, but also they've got to be on board because it's very transparent when it's just a payday and a celebrity showing up for an appearance. So that's what they're seeking to do here. And I guess that's the test of having some celebrity involvement for both nights for this weekend.
Avoiding the Jeremy Piven factor. Yes.
Yeah. Summerfest was not so much a success. Right. And then we rounded out with Riddle and Sheamus and Nia Jax and Shayna defending the tag titles. As the resident stoner on this call, Mouth, I mean, Riddle has been, to me, the most detestable figure, I would say, on television. I'm not even going to leave it to pro wrestling. I despise this character with a passion.
Well, again, it's like Jay was talking about. It's a character that is like decades old. It's kind of based on that Louis Piccoli thing from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That's going to appeal to guys like me. But I don't enjoy it either. I think he's been totally wasted since he came up to the main. Good choice of words. Totally wasted since he came up to the main roster because it's idiotic. Every week he comes across like an idiot. He's zipping around on his scooter. Like he's just like a really annoying character at this point. I don't see anybody really getting behind him. I find it annoying when he's on.
It's another match where I choose to ignore what I've seen every single week on TV and just focus on the wrestling because these two have shown that they have great chemistry, especially when things can get very physical and a bit more kind of aggressive and stiff between the two. So I look forward to the match itself. I wish there was actually a bit of a stipulation attached to this one, a Nigerian drum fight maybe.
Well, there's a belt attached to this one. I mean, you do have that. You have the United States Championship attached. I'm wondering if they open it and do some sort of parody of the Daniel Bryan, 15 or 17 second win that they did with Sheamus years ago and play off that with these two.
Or maybe he has like a really elaborate entrance with like some grand scooter entrance that he's going to be coming in. That's going to have some, explosive pyro. Maybe this will be the first guy to come out on the night.
He should come down on the scooter for sure and do something spectacular. I mean, we've seen Darby Allin utilize the skateboard very, very well in AEW. And if it wasn't so goofy, I guess it could work.
What if when he kicks the flip-flops off, instead of the graphics, it's actual birds that are dispersed from ringside that fly throughout the stadium?
I love it.
Yeah, they could do that. Yeah. And
then we'll fit in The Fiend and Randy Orton somewhere on this second night. And that's WrestleMania. We got 14 matches announced over 2 nights. And I honestly believe like the show length is going to have a great factor on how people enjoy these shows. Because I think if you keep them to 3 hours, 15 minutes, I think that's going to be pretty positively received, especially if you go off with Bianca Belair and Daniel Bryan as your champions. I think you're going to end on pretty significant high notes that I'm optimistic in people enjoying these shows for just the format of them alone.
Along with it being able to watch a show with a live crowd as well, that will be refreshing after this entire year. So they have they have those things working in favor. I think that we've said it so many times on this show, though, especially you, Wai. You've said, I'm going to ignore the build and enjoy the match. There's been a lack of build and a lack of thought to a lot of these from Asuka and Rhea, from Sammy and Kevin, Riddle and Sheamus. These have all potential to be great matches, but again, I'm not invested in the storyline, so it's already got something working against it.
I'd even go and throw Banks and Belair. Like when Belair won the Royal Rumble, I thought they had an incredible match on their hands to build up. And I think all of the Reginald stuff and this necessity that we have to have these weekly stories, I think it's hurt the build up for this. And I'm glad they've gotten Reginald removed from this mix. But to me, that match is not at the level I think it should have been, even though I think that the match will be very well received, and that's what people will likely remember. But I can't say like the last 2 months has enhanced that match for me. It already started off at a pretty significant place, and I think it's in spite of a lot of the weekly television that people are still interested in this.
Part of the issue is the fact you had both of these characters being tweeners. You had the big win from Belair, but she had the celebration, but then went back and forth with the babyface heel to me. And Sasha, who plays out as a heel constantly, was still being pushed as a babyface. So there was that dynamic that they still had to establish before starting to build this feud, and it was late to the game.
Do you guys want to spend a few minutes just chatting about the TakeOver cards? Wednesday and Thursday night, 10 matches between the two. We've got Io Shirai and Raquel Gonzalez night 1, and then the 2 big matches promoted for night 2, Finn Balor and Karrion Kross, and the unsanctioned match between Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly, which I could see ending off the second night. I would not want to be Balor and Kross following this, because I think those two are going to get probably 30 minutes, and I think that to me would be the match I would end the second night with.
The fact that they've done so much. Oh, yes. Yes, he does. Yeah. The fact that they put so much promotional power between that single match ahead of everything else on, across either TakeOver tells me that they will probably end both nights of TakeOver with that particular match. That is the match I'm looking forward to the most. But I think on both nights, you have a really, really stacked lineup. Beyond that, look at night 1 with Walter versus Ciampa, who, like the build has been fine. It's just really been as simple as I think it needs to be. I want that guy. From Tommaso Ciampa. And it's like, it's a match that sells itself on paper. Same with Pete Dunne versus Kushida. There's really no storyline leading to that, but to me, it's like a bit of a dream match, to be quite honest with you. The main event of that night with Io Shirai and Raquel Gonzalez, I think will be the biggest test, obviously, of Raquel Gonzalez's career. I think she'll do great. And whether or not we get a title change, I don't think so. But it'll probably be a star-making night for her.
I think we do see that title change, actually. I think that it's a long time coming. They were kind of late to the game after the War Games win, because Raquel got the pin on Io in War Games, and they should have gone right there. But they've waited. They've done it here. I think Io's had her time in NXT. She needs to move to one of the other brands. And Raquel's dominant. I mean, how this woman has improved has been absolutely insane. And part of it is the way she's been pushed as well. I'm very much looking forward to this.
Yeah, I would say that Raquel to me is one that it's like, she seems so tailor-made that I wonder if they're earmarking her for the main roster above Io. Like, that would be my only hesitation of her winning this, because I think they're all in. She has improved dramatically over this past year, and I think has every attribute that they'd be looking at. And conversely, on the second night, I think you look at the same with a Karrion Kross, that it's either time to put the title on him, or this is his swan song to go to the main roster himself. And I think that would be probably a better avenue for Karrion Kross than NXT. So those are kind of some of the interesting figures to watch on both nights. But yeah, this is a stacked pair of lineups for both nights, and it looks like that both will be airing on the network internationally as well, including the Wednesday night one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, simulcast and commercial free on the network, right?
Yeah, so that's interesting.
I think Karrion does make the move. I mean, I don't like the character. I don't like the performer. I think Scarlett is the best part of the act, but I do think that he is making the move, and therefore, I guess Balor is retaining there. It might have been smart to do something with the Demon at this point, because that's an undefeatable character in the folklore of wrestling, and therefore wouldn't make Cross look too bad to lose. It'll be interesting to see how they get around that, to have him lose and then shelve him to another brand. But he belongs in one of the other two. I see the next opponent for Drew McIntyre after he wins the title.
Does anyone see the possibility of them looking at, now that the move to Tuesday is happening, that they look at Finn Balor, that was, he was a main roster performer, that this experiment is over and it's time to bring him back to Raw or SmackDown?
Very possible. Yeah, I think so. And maybe swap him out for somebody else that's supposed to move on to Tuesdays. I think either situation is possible. It's a pretty unpredictable match, and I don't think you would be going wrong with either scenario.
Which is good. Which is, I mean, that's the one thing that we can say for matches on this card, and especially with the three-way on Mania as well. The fact that we're sitting here wondering who's going to win. There's no foregone conclusion, and there isn't even we think this person, but it's WWE, so it's going to be the other guy. There isn't even that on these two cards. These two cards have a bunch of question marks, and that's the way wrestling should be.
And plus, NXT, it's the those are the workhorse shows. Those are the shows where you're going to get the killer wrestling, like Wai mentioned, with, Walter against Tommaso Ciampa and stuff like that, where you're going to get all the gimmicks and the silly stuff on Mania, your drum matches and fiends and guys jumping off cages. And then on TakeOver is where you really get the solid work. And for me, a lot of the time, I don't even worry about the angles on NXT because they're all such solid workers. And I know that the match itself is going to be pretty amazing.
I did see some of the clips today. They were doing this NXT press conference, and it's all in character stuff, but I thought Walter was just the best. He's being asked these questions, and he's just answering like in a very matter-of-fact tone that, it would have been ideal if I could have faced the Tommaso Ciampa of 2 years ago when he was more, I respected him a bit more, but this version of Tommaso Ciampa, it'll be fine. But I really wish I could have faced the Ciampa of 2 years ago. And it's just all these like little, just subtle shots that he was taking. I think he's like a dramatically underrated performer when it comes to just his ability to convey that championship aura and just his speaking ability as well. So I think certainly that's going to be a big standout match of the whole week as well with Ciampa. So I'm looking forward to these shows. I think they should be pretty strong. And with NXT, like you always, like we were just talking about, the fact that you always have that kind of question mark about certain talent that could be moving on. That's something that Raw and SmackDown, I mean, you don't get that luxury because the idea of moving to Raw and SmackDown means nothing. You've mixed up the rosters so much that had you had a true brand split that every year come Mania, I think that would have added some intrigue of if someone, it's time to freshen them up and move over, but that holds no substance. Whereas with NXT, you can look at certain performers and that makes it intriguing of who is going over and could they have plans to pluck any of these people up to the main roster.
That's one thing WWE has really lost that I don't think that we've touched on. I don't know if you guys have, but I was talking to Meltzer about it last week. The surprise element that is involved in the Raw after Mania. You guys, weren't you at the Dolph Ziggler win? Like, weren't you there live that many years ago? Yeah, you guys were there for that. Like, that moment was incredible. The Fandango moment, the ridiculousness that came about. I remember throwing that party at Bryden's where Enzo and Cass came out, and it was mind-blowing when we were all excited for Enzo and Cass. That's all gone now. And I don't know if that's pandemic-wise or that's a lot of that, I think, is because NXT has become a brand unto itself. And you don't necessarily have that big surprise debut that we all used to be excited about after WrestleMania, the night of Raw. That's gone. It's just another show now. And that sucks because that became so special and so excited. And for the hardcore fans, when you were traveling there, that's kind of the show that you were looking forward to the day after.
Yeah, I think the night after Raw, I think that mystique kind of died down several years ago before the pandemic. And I mean, with this year where you don't even have fans there, that takes so much out of it. I almost wouldn't want to waste a debut the night after when you have no one to even react to these people. But that's kind of the situation you're in. You can't just put your plans on hold indefinitely if you have a plan for, say, a Karrion Kross. But yeah, I think that's something that is definitely diminished from those years where that was a big, the big party show of the year for WWE, and I think it's lessened.
Sure.
There you go. That is WrestleMania week coming up. Is there anything else this weekend that's jumping out at either of you? Mouth. Is there anything you're going to be seeking out this weekend beyond the marathon of WWE content?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm I always look forward to just watching AEW on Wednesday. I know it's nothing special. It's not part of this, but I look forward to that. I want to see the Stone Cold Jericho thing, honestly, and the takeover nights. I think those are the big highlights for me. I have to say, and I think our general kind of lackadaisical approach in this last hour, I'm not really excited for the WrestleMania cards. There's nothing on it that really I'm like, I want to see that. Whereas TakeOver and the Jericho Austin thing, those are things where I'm like, yes, I want to see those. I'm intrigued in those. I'm not very much intrigued with the main Mania cards.
I want to see what the set looks like. I've already seen some drone footage of what the production of it looks like, but I really do miss having like those big grand stages, and with this one being an outdoor one as well, I'm as excited for that as anything else.
Normally, I look forward to Tuesday once we get through everything and this is all done and we can breathe after covering all of this. This year, that's not even there, though, because Tuesday is the debut of NXT on Tuesdays, then AEW on Wednesdays, then Impact on Thursday, and then you're back to SmackDown on Friday. I guess I'm looking forward to the following Saturday. That's what I'm looking forward to, guys, when we can take a breath.
Does that mean you're not going to be watching Jake Paul and Ben Askren on that Saturday?
Listen, I love me a Ben Askren promo, but I'm probably going to be skipping that.
Well, before we wrap things up, Jay, do you happen to remember the last time the four of us did a show together?
Would it have been the Royal Rumble at my house?
All four of us.
Yeah, the Royal Rumble was only three of us, I think.
It was the worst of or best of?
It was the worst of show. So I thought we could end things by going back to assess how we all fared in 2018, likely and unlikely, and see how things went. I've not compiled them all for the sake of time, but some standouts here, everyone. So this was compiled in, I guess, December of 2017. Aleister Black wins the NXT title. All of us said likely. All of us were correct. Lucha Underground tapes season 4 and is still a weekly show. Agnew and Wai said likely to this. They ended up shooting season 4, but it met its demise on Halloween of 2018. So didn't quite make it to the finish line of 2018. WWE leaves the USA Network. All of us said unlikely. They are never going to leave the USA Network at this particular juncture. Chris Jericho is part of the G1 this summer. Jay and Wai said unlikely. Chris Jericho did not participate in the G1 climax that year. Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley have a match in WWE. Why was this so far-fetched? Because Bobby Lashley had not returned to WWE yet. Jay, you said unlikely. They got Lashley. They did not put these guys near each other in WWE throughout this particular time. Ronda Rousey has a wrestling match with Stephanie McMahon. This is weeks before she would debut. All of us said likely, and she would have a tag match with Stephanie McMahon at that year's WrestleMania. Bray Wyatt's gimmick is abandoned. All of us said unlikely, but Wai was hoping for an evolution to the character. Well, Wai,
he got it.
Got your evolution of the character, where now we have incorporated death, we have incorporated swamps,
fire.
Every element has been represented through the Fiend, the Swamp Man, Bray Wyatt.
Amazing. Wow.
Don Callis and Scott D'Amore are executives at Impact. Wai was the only one who thought this was a possibility for these two to last together.
Wow.
2018. The rest of us were more pessimistic, but here they are all these years later, still in executive roles at Impact Wrestling. Jeff Jarrett would appear on WWE programming. All of us said unlikely to this. The man went into the Hall of Fame. He was in the Rumble the next year. And dude, Jeff Jarrett, more lives than a cat in professional wrestling. As he found himself in the nucleus of WWE. Conor McGregor vacates his lightweight title. All of us said likely, and that is exactly what would happen. He would be stripped of his lightweight title, though none of us predicted that it would happen after throwing a dolly at a bus. That was not part of the predictions. Brock Lesnar has an MMA fight. Myself, Mouth, and Wai said unlikely. He would not fight. NXT moves to linear television, and Jay, you said that after a test of NXT on USA in 2017, it's going to happen eventually, but not this year. The rest of us said unlikely. So I think the long-term game, Jay nailed that one.
Yeah. Long-term booking. Wow.
And the last one, 3 weeks before he was set to challenge for it, Francis Ngannou would become UFC heavyweight champion. All of us said likely, and given this is a retrospective game, in the end, we were all correct.
Just took a while.
Nice.
Long-term booking.
Yeah.
And then we said at the end, we will revisit this next year. That turned out to be unlikely. We got to it eventually.
Well, yeah.
3 years.
Well, there you go. That's the show. Guys, what do you have coming up this week in terms of WrestleMania week coverage?
Well, we've got our 2 after parties, so Mouth and I are going to do both nights of those. And that is for patrons. They can go ahead and join us live now that we're not live on the radio after the shows, and we take their questions via Zoom. And so we're doing both Saturday and Sunday night. Along with that, Boris and Matt have got the NXT coverage. And then on Friday, this is one that I wanted to highlight because I thought that this was pretty cool. So this roundtable here is launching a new roundtable show that we're going to do on Sunday night's main event in our family of shows. The second one is going up on Friday and involves Andrew Fung from Kim's Convenience, K. Trevor Wilson from Letterkenny, and Carlos Bustamante from ET Canada. And we sit there for an hour and we talk about how we all kind of keep in touch via wrestling, and they kind of echo the sentiments with their friends that this is how we keep in touch. And it's like a secret society when you're out there in the business world, and all of a sudden someone mentions wrestling, and you get into this in-depth chat, and then you figure out how in-depth that person actually is. ECW tape trading came up on this thing. So it's really fun, and it's just kind of neat. 3 people from very different, well, kind of this, we're all in the entertainment world, but just kind of shooting the shit about stuff. And that goes up on the patron feed on Friday. So that is a fun one. We preview WrestleMania as well. So some of the stuff that we talked about here. How about you guys?
We have got our usual roster of shows coming out, but of course, our friends at Up Next have their TakeOver reviews, post shows. They're doing watch-alongs all week along on their Twitch. But if you subscribe to their podcast feed, you get TakeOver Night 1 and TakeOver Night 2 reviews this week. Our friends at the British Wrestling Experience have a history of WCW in Europe with Gary Michael Capetta that they did for us on Post Podcast Day. That's going up on their free feed on Thursday. John and I are back on Wednesday and Friday with Rewind to Dynamite and Rewind to SmackDown. WH Park and Nate Milton will be doing their Falcon and Winter Soldier review on MCU Later, which is a part of our Patreon. And then 2 nights of WrestleMania post shows coming up this weekend. Live on Saturday night for Double Plus patrons at postwrestlingcafe.com. And then live for all patrons Sunday night at postwrestlingcafe.com.
And Lovranski, of course, you've got the old fucks thing happening.
Yep. Me and Joe will run through whatever happens on AEW this week and run down the whole show, give our thoughts, the whole deal. Maybe if we've seen the first night of TakeOver by that point, maybe we'll talk about that too.
So there's lots for people to experience for whatever they sign up for and consume.
Well, that's going to wrap it up. Guys, it was great to catch up. I'm glad we got to do this show. Best of luck all week long with all of the coverage. Mouth, I hope you survive both nights. Remember, moderation is key.
Yes, I will try to remember.
Yeah, best to preserve yourself before Randy Orton and The Fiend.
Oh, God. Hopefully that matches first, like you guys were talking about. Get it out of the way.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for tuning in on both of our feeds, and who knows, maybe we will all get together at some point in the near future. And that is going to wrap it up. Now you are officially ready to begin your WrestleMania week.